This guitar has got an older body with a maple neck. The neck is a modern C shape and the fingerboard radius is about 9.5 inches. But what does all that mean? And why should you care? Guitar specs can be essential for determining whether or not you're going to enjoy playing a guitar without actually trying the guitar out in person. If you're buying something on eBay, or if you live in Glasgow and fancy a guitar that's down in our shop in Brighton, you're going to be hard pushed to make that journey just to try the guitar out. So then, knowing what different specs mean and which ones you particularly like can give you a great insight into the guitar in question and give you a good idea of whether or not you're going to enjoy the guitar before you've even held it. With that being said then, let's go through every single spec you're likely to find on the listing for an electric guitar and try and decipher what's what and which ones are right for which players. Now there's a lot to cover here, so I'm going to have to go pretty fast, so watch out for the changes and try to keep up, okay? Now, body material on an electric guitar is not quite as important as, say, on an acoustic guitar. It's usually going to be pretty functional, but it can still make a bit of a difference. Often with most guitars, and certainly cheaper guitars, you'll find that it's a combination of different pieces of wood all stuck together. However, on more expensive guitars, it tends to all be made out of one piece of wood just to increase the amount of resonance and sustain that you get from the wood. Often, more expensive custom shops will have choice body woods that have been picked specifically for their resonant capabilities, their tone, and their sustain. Whereas on more affordable factory line guitars, the woods are often more chosen for their availability, just to keep the supply of guitars regular. Next up, the body finish. Generally speaking, on most guitars, you're going to have either a satin or a gloss finish. Satin finishes are generally a little bit thinner than gloss finishes and don't have the same shine that you'd get from gloss. They can look nicer than gloss for some people. Other people may prefer gloss. It doesn't make a huge difference. Now, the actual material used for the finish can be a variety of different substances. Most commonly, you will find nitrocellulose, which just smells amazing when you get it out of the case, or you'll see something like a gloss polyurethane. Generally speaking, poly or polyurethane finishes tend to be a little bit thicker and they're a little bit more factory line and standard today. Whereas nitrocellulose finishes, or nitro finishes as you might hear them commonly referred to, are a little bit thinner and would tend to have been used more on vintage style instruments in the past. Because nitro is a little bit thinner, it's a bit more porous, and some people argue that that helps the resonance of the wood, but I'll be honest, I'm sure that effect is pretty minimal. Nitro finishes can also tend to be a little bit more reactive than polyurethane, so just be careful with what you're resting your guitar on. Neck material. Much like body material, neck material is not going to make mountains and mountains of difference to your guitar tone, but it can certainly help with things like sustain and resonance as well. Mahogany and maple necks tend to be the main options that you're going to find here, with roasted maple coming in as a bit more of a popular option into the modern market. If you don't know what roasted maple means, then we have already done a video on it, so go and watch that and get yourself refreshed. Neck material mainly comes down to personal preference. However, you might find that some manufacturers tend to prefer one over the other, so generally speaking, Fender have maple necks and Gibson have mahogany. Neck join is the way in which the guitar neck is attached to the body. In terms of guitars, you generally have three different options. You have bolt-on, you have set neck, and you have neck through. Bolt-on tends to be the most affordable and easiest to do because you literally just bolt the neck onto the body, and what this means is that the neck and the body can be made in separate parts of the production and then just bolted together towards the end of the production line. You might find that some manufacturers like Fender tend to just have it as a standard for all of their guitars because it tends to make things a lot easier in terms of the production. If done well and with great care, it doesn't make that much difference to the tone. Set necks are a little bit more deliberate and permanent than a bolt-on neck. It's usually attached to the body with some kind of carpentry join like a dovetail join and a strong adhesive glue. It's going to give you a little bit more resonance and sustain on your guitar, but does require some decent craftsmanship to get it right. Neck through joins combine the neck and the body either as one piece of wood or the neck being a center block piece through the guitar around which the rest of the body wood is attached. They're rarer and harder to manufacture, however, they will provide you a lot more sustain with your guitar. You'll find a lot more resonance in the wood, and it will also help increase the intonation stability due to the stability of the wood in one piece. Jackson soloist guitars are a classic example of a guitar with neck-through joins as standard. As I said earlier though, different manufacturers will prefer different types of joins. So for example, if you want to buy a Stratocaster, you're literally always going to get a bolt-on, and if you want a Gibson Les Paul, it's always going to be a set neck. Next up, neck shape. Now this is where it's entirely subjective and personal to your own tastes. And it's also really annoying to talk about because all different manufacturers call their neck shapes different things. There isn't a complete standard measurement for necks, it's just the kind of shape that they tend to be. Basically speaking, neck shape refers to the way in which the neck behind the fingerboard is rounded to fit your hands. Most of the names of necks refer to letters that are shaped like the neck curve, for example C's and D shapes and U shapes. There are, however, absolutely loads of different options across all different brands, like soft V's, modern C's, vintage C's, and even things like wizard necks that you'll find on Ibanez guitars as well. Vintage guitars tended to have thicker, chunkier necks and really suit people who like to feel a nice thick handful of wood. However, over the years, to complement different styles, as well as people who started to play a lot more technical and fast-paced guitar, the necks have gotten a little bit slimmer and a little bit more contoured. So this is where it really benefits you to know which types of necks you've played in the past and which necks you feel most comfortable on. Moving on to the fingerboards. Now, fingerboard material can have a little bit of a difference tone-wise, and given that it's going to be on the front of your guitar, it has a big impact aesthetically. So that makes it really useful to know which you like the best. The three most classically used materials tend to be rosewood, ebony, or maple. However, with CITES restrictions making it more and more difficult to import and export rosewood from different countries, a lot of manufacturers have substituted it with a wood like Pal Ferro because it's very, very similar and it's a lot more readily available and makes the production of guitars more smooth. Now, as I mentioned, there is a little bit of a tone difference. You might find maple to be a bit brighter. Generally speaking, what is more important here is how it feels to you and how it looks to you. Some people prefer rosewood boards, some like the dark color of ebony, some people just love a classic maple fingerboard. Next up is fingerboard radius. Now, fingerboard radius confused me for years as to what it was, and I'm sure there's a lot of people out there who don't quite know what it's telling you. But essentially, it's trying to tell you how round the fingerboard is and what sort of camber you're looking at from one side to the other. Often you're given a figure like 9.5-inch radius. But what does that mean? Well, imagine the curve on your fingerboard continued all the way round until it formed a full circle. The measurement from the edge of this imaginary circle to the center of this circle is where we find this radius figure. That's pretty abstract, right? But what this number means in terms of curvature is that the larger the radius, the bigger the circle, and therefore the flatter this particular segment of that circle that the fingerboard is making up of is going to be. So essentially what it means is the bigger the number, the flatter the board. Yeah. So bigger number, flatter fretboard, smaller number, more curved. Now, which one of those is right for you? Well, more curved fretboards are much better for people with slightly smaller hands who are playing a lot of chords and things like that, whereas flatter boards give you a little bit more dexterity when you're playing single notes and more intricate lead parts. Again though, it's all down to the individual, so if you've got a guitar that you're pretty comfortable on the neck of, it's probably worth looking up at the fingerboard radius and determining that if you're choosing another guitar. You can also get compound fingerboard radiuses, which change the curvature of the fretboard as you go down it, but let's not get into that. Scale length refers to the length of the fretboard. However, it's worth pointing out at this point that it doesn't necessarily dictate the number of frets. Adults with larger hands may prefer longer scale lengths so that their fingers don't get tripped up over each other when playing frets, whereas children or adults with smaller hands may prefer something that's a bit more compact so that their reach is slightly longer over the frets. Which one you'd prefer is very much down to your own preference. However, what you will find is that a lot of brands will have their own standards. For example, Gibson have a scale length of around 24.75 inches and Fender is slightly longer, sitting at 25.5. You may see travel guitars or student classical guitars and things like that refer to short scale, and that basically just means that the length of the fretboard has been shortened, which makes it easier for people with little hands. Time to look at the nut. The material used in your nut can have quite a big say on your tuning stability, so it's good to know which ones are better to look out for. Plastic is obviously the cheapest, and you're most likely going to have to settle for that on a more affordable guitar. Again, it comes down to ease of production and availability of the parts. Graphite is used for more modern guitars and is known for its impeccable stability, whereas vintage guitars of the 50s and 60s tended to use a bone nut. The bone in bone nuts are derived from a cow bone, so probably not the best option to go for if you're a vegan. Luckily, in the modern day, there are loads of alternatives to bone, like Graphtec, that's made of more advanced materials that you can use without having to resort to a beefy bone nut. The nut width determines how spaced out the strings are going to be at the neck. Again, it's all down to personal preference. If you've got bigger hands, you might prefer it being slightly more spaced out to give you space to make chord shapes, whereas if you've got smaller hands, you might find that a slimmer nut width gives you more reach over the fingerboard. Moving up from the nut to the top of the neck, you have the tuners. Now, there are generally just a few different types of tuners out there that are either vintage style or modern style. Vintage tuners tend to have the hole in the middle of the peg, so you poke your string into that and then wind it round, whereas modern tuners tend to have a hole through the peg that you poke the string through and then wrap it round. Neither is better or worse, it just comes down to what you're used to and what you prefer. You can further help your tuning stability by looking out for things such as locking tuners, which lock the string in place, and they're a bit more of a modern appointment that you'll find on more modern styled guitars. They help a lot, particularly when you're going to be using a lot of tremolo or doing a lot of excessive string bending. Now, pickups are going to be the biggest deciding factor in how the guitar sounds, and they are their own entire world completely. There are millions of different options with different configurations and different wiring, and quite frankly, it might even warrant its own video in the future. So my best advice for now in this video is to go and listen to a load of different types of pickups and different wiring and configuration, and listen and see what you think is best, and that's going to give you a good idea of what you prefer. Let's, however, go over some key points. Single coil pickups are the thinnest sounding pickups that you're most likely to find in things like Stratocasters and Telecasters. P90 pickups are very similar to single coil pickups, and you're likely to find them in things like the Jazzmasters or very early 50s Les Pauls. Humbuckers are basically double wound versions of single coils that reduce a lot of electrical hum and can be found in things like modern Les Pauls and SGs and 335s and anything that's suited to rock or things that need a lot of gain. Single coils tend to sound the brightest and crispiest, but can be quite vulnerable to a lot of noise, particularly if you're running a lot of gain through them. Humbuckers tend to have a bit of a thicker, warmer sound, and they can stand up much better to higher gain without going too noisy like a single coil would. The position of the pickup on the body can also have quite a big impact on the tone. For example, if the pickup is towards the neck of the guitar, then it tends to have a bit more of a warmer sound, whereas if they're towards the bridge, then they have a bit more of a bright trebly sound. Speaking of the bridge, that's what holds all your strings onto the end of your guitar, so it's important that it's robust and keeps your tuning stable and your intonation even. You can either get a hardtail bridge, which is fixed to the body and is going to be the most stable for the tuning, or you can get a tremolo or a vibrato bridge. Tremolo arms allow you to rapidly change the pitch of all your strings by loosening or tightening them using a lever. However, as you can imagine, this makes the tuning a little bit more unstable than having a fixed bridge. So if you don't think you're going to be the type of guitarist to do loads of dive bombs like Eddie Van Halen, and you just want something that's a bit more stable on tuning, then maybe just go for a hardtail. You can, however, get specific tremolo bridges that have locking nuts at the top that you screw in with an Allen key that makes the tuning much more stable. However, they can be a little bit of a faff to set up, so I'd only do that if you're serious about your dive bombing guitar career. Floyd Roses are a great example of a locking trem that are used on all types of different guitars. Vintage style guitars like Stratocasters have generally just got a standard tremolo. A good compromise between the two extremes is something like a 2-point tremolo bridge, which is attached to the body in 2 places rather than 1, and gives you just a bit more tuning stability without having to faff about with a locking nut tremolo. Okay, I think that is everything. Now, of course, I imagine there is going to be some exceptions to what I've said, and I doubt I have covered absolutely everything you're likely to see, but hopefully I've done my best. I hope this gives you a better idea of what to look for when you're looking at a guitar without being able to try it in person, and helps clear up some of the confusing jargon that you're likely to see when looking at new guitars. Look, of course, there is no substitute to getting a guitar in your hands and trying it in person. However, getting a handle on the different specs that you'll find on guitar listings can really be the next best thing. And if you know what measurements or specs that you're comfortable with, or ones that you don't particularly like, then it can give you a good idea of whether or not you're going to enjoy playing a guitar without having to go all the way down to a shop to try it. So there you have it, every spec you need to know on an electric guitar. I hope you've enjoyed the video, or at the very least learned something. If you think I've missed anything out, which I'm certainly not doubting, then pop it down in the comments. If you have any advice for someone looking at a massive list of specs who's quite confused, then pop it down in the comments below. Or if you have a question, then pop it down there and let's try and help each other out. What particular spec do you think is most important when choosing a guitar? Let us know down in the comments. Thanks as always for watching. If you enjoyed the video, hit the like button, subscribe to see more things like this, and we will see you very soon.